Alright everyone, it's time for the Occult video number 236, Coincidences versus Synchronicity. This is something that I've been asked to actually talk about. Synchronicity in a more general sense I've already covered. The idea that sometimes within a spiritual framework of reality, things synchronize together, they overlap in a way that has meaning. It's a meaningful overlap. Basically a coincidence that's not really a coincidence. How then do you differentiate, if you believe in this subject at all, and I happen to, how do you differentiate, number one, between what is just genuinely a coincidence, like, oh, well, two things happen to coincide, but it doesn't mean anything, or one that has meaning? I think herein lies a little bit of a philosophical challenge, because people tend to give importance to different things. So a coincidence to one person may be taken as synchronous to another because they're giving more importance to the subject matter. And I've already talked about the fact that mainline religion, in the mainstream organized sense, like having a priesthood or something, class system or whatever, was basically the result of people noting what they thought were synchronicities, what they thought were cause and effect in a real sense, but it was just a hijacking of that evolutionary mechanism for humans to be able to understand the concept. For instance, I use the story of Urg. Urg got mad at his cave woman wife, kicks a rock on the way out of his cave. He goes hunting, does really well, brings back a big chunk of woolly mammoth. The next day he gets mad, he kicks the rock again, goes out, he brings back, several deer or something. Third day he's not mad at his cave woman wife. She gives him her hairy hole. And see, he's not mad, he doesn't kick the rock, he doesn't get anything. Somewhere in Urg's slightly caveman advanced but ultimately dim mind registers the possibility that kicking the rock ritualistically brings good hunting. All he has to do is have one more coincidental rock-kicking incident for him to be completely convinced that this is what people need to do. Even when it fails, they'll tend to ignore the failures and dwell on the times that it works. It's just an innate human tendency. It's an evolutionary trait. That being said, what about the concept of synchronicity in a larger sense? If you're studying the spiritual and you notice that two spiritual systems that have nothing really in tandem happen to overlap on a subject, you can give that importance. The key lies in this. You've got to try to determine whether that should be given any form of importance. The fact that things happen to correlate or overlap itself doesn't really matter. And by the way, I should point this out. I'm not a believer in fate. I used to dabble with determinism. Then I realized that if the universe was an open system, determinism didn't need to exist and in fact probably couldn't. And that if it wasn't an open system, then that brings about a whole different set of philosophical questions that we have to ask ourselves. What lies at the edge of the universe? Is there a brick wall there? Who put the brick wall there, so to speak? And it gets into the topic of theism, potentially, or creationism. Occam's razor, I think I prefer the former explanation. Well, there's no wall beyond the universe. There's probably other universes. It's an open system. It's not a limited one. It's an infinitely convoluted mechanism. And so I basically scrapped determinism. This also matters, not believing directly in the concept of fate, not really having a reason to believe or disbelieve necessarily in theism. I'm apatheistic. I don't really care about the God argument at this point. I've decided that it's irrelevant to my interests. Since I've gotten past that, the belief in synchronicity, if it exists at all, in one sense, you could be talking about glitches in a matrix sort of stuff, sort of get into the new age sci-fi sort of occult argument, which is exciting maybe to do. And you can do that at your leisure if you're interested in that. There are, I think, more and more people who are guessing that this might all be an illusion. Like what I'm doing right now isn't even real. I'm an alien strapped into a machine and this is an AI program. It's a video game. It is possible that's the case. By the way, imagine how funny it is that video game avatars would then invent video game avatars and be talking about the possibility of AI as well in their own already artificial existence. Imagine that it's aliens all the way down, like you're an alien strapped into an AI game, but in that reality, that's AI too, and a different alien is strapped into a different game chair, and all the way up until you become some sort of weird supreme being. That'd be interesting. Well, what if we're actually just expressions of God strapped into AI chairs? You should build a religion around that. I'm just mouthing off. I don't actually believe that. Or you can say, what if this reality isn't artificial? That's not what's causing synchronicity. Well, then what does? Is it angelic or demonic in form? Is it, truly spiritual? You could explain it that way. You could say that it's all just bullshit. You could say that synchronicity, even where it's evident, doesn't have any greater meaning at all, and you shouldn't base anything off of it. So yeah, just a little bit about that. I happen to believe, generally speaking, the idea of coincidences is definitely a thing. Like, there are some times that things are just coincidental, like with Urg's rock kicking. The fact that he ritualistically kicked the rock did not actually cause him to hunt more. If anything, the only real effect that it had is convince him to be more self-assured, and so maybe he put more effort into his hunting that day. He was more relaxed about it. He could notice things more, and it was a self-fulfilling prophecy sort of situation. That being said, what if Urg discovers that his hunting is better when he delves into alchemy, and then, you find out 1,000 years later that Urg actually invented methamphetamine or something like that? That could happen too. Well, then it's real. There was a cause and effect definitely there. I like to think of it in more refined terms, though. What I do in my spiritual study, giving an anecdote as an example, when I'm reading all of these different occult pieces of literature, not just for editing, but the ones attendant that I have to read as secondary material, which is a vast core of material, it gets a little bit daunting actually organizing the fucking files at some point. When I'm doing that, sometimes I remember that in a different book something similar was mentioned. Like, two things overlap, similar systems, or within a system, similar names, similar concepts, similar geographic overlap, for example. Things of that nature, I think, within the human timeline of spiritual history certainly matter a great deal, and that's recognized within that. If things appear to overlap and you're an archaeologist, giving it importance isn't frowned upon. If you give it importance, though, in spirituality, it can be considered kooky. I find that slightly odd, since spirituality and history are part and parcel the same in some areas. Spirituality certainly evolves, even overlaps with biology after a fashion. Behavioral science, behavior tends to evolve over time. The human species is not just evolving genetically. Our behavior is becoming, more advanced, you could say, or simply changing over time in response to outside stimuli. I know this is a little bit more dense and philosophical than some of the occult videos. It's a little bit different from just talking about the Loch Ness Monster or my feelings on the Abominable Snowman. I think I'll do the Abominable Snowman next, actually. I've done Bigfoot, but I haven't actually done that particular subgroup of that cryptid. That's about all. Peace out.